Good
Morning.
morning. So apparently, we're talking about real estate this morning. We're talking about housing and living indoors and all things related. Yes?
It's good to be indoors now.
Yes. Good to be indoors, even when your circuits break because the space heater overtaxes it. It's good to be indoors.
Listen,
Beats the alternative.
I didn't have heat in our office for like 4 days last week. The heaters do not work once it goes below zero. So even including the wind chill factor. So even if it was like
That's
9 degrees, but with the wind chill factor, dumb. I'm like, is it not a dumb heater? Like what?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
that's when you need heat.
That's when you need it the most. That's like banks. That's like the banks who, if you go into overdraft by $1, ding you for another 30 or $40.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
My bank never ever reaches out like, "Thank you for having so much money in the bank." That's only when there's no money.
Yeah. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
oh, you're in climate overdraft. We'll turn off the heat.
Oh
Yeah,
my
not a
god.
good idea. So it's a
So,
crazy market. Yes,
yeah, it's a crazy
people,
market.
crazy stuff.
And so let's see, I have a little banner. So yeah, and I don't know what happened to my other banner, but that's okay. So yeah, sellers are used to getting multiple bids
Multiple bids on
on
properties. Yes,
properties. Let me
yes.
let's
That will
fix
not
this
last
right.
forever.
No, well, no, it will not last forever. But it's sort of become
The new normal.
I'm fixing my typo. Yeah, it's sort of become the new normal and it's what you're accustomed to now. But what we're seeing
Hmm.
um oftentimes are buyers putting bids on multiple properties at one time.
Yes,
And so
and very confused real estate agents. Very
yeah,
confused buyer
and a
agents.
lot of like, "That's unethical, and you can't be doing that," and, stuff being thrown around. Um, it's not unethical. It's a very tricky market, and I'm happy to hear that there's realtors who actually have a strategy for winning bids for their buyers because you can't just be doing the same old, same old. You need a strategy, and that's what that is. That's a strategy to get yourself in on more than one property and hoping that at the end of the day you win one. Actually, my very good friend Trudy Iglesias, who's one of the top agents in Westchester County,
Hmm.
um, consistently. Yesterday was at my house, and before she left, she had to put in 3 offers for one buyer, um, all insanely over asking price, like numbers
Yeah.
close to 100,000, and
So here's
so
what.
that's what sparked the conversation.
So here's what people outside of our market. What are you doing? Oh,
Celery
okay.
juice.
Outside of our market, people may not realize this, but we do it a little weird here. So if you are in Florida, Albany, New York, uh, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, wherever, if your buyer writes an offer, the piece of paper you write the offer on typically becomes the real estate contract when the seller countersigns that document. Here in Westchester County and Fairfield and the surrounding areas, it is not that way. It is not that way in Long Island, New York City, Hudson Valley. We have this sort of like handshake system where we have memos and deal sheets and uh, stuff goes to the attorney in a memo, and the attorneys draw up the contract. And typically, it takes about 2 weeks for a property to go under contract fully. So you make your offer around here. Once you have a meeting of the minds, either an inspection is done and then the memorandum goes out, or the memorandum goes out while you're doing the inspections. The attorneys get the memorandums. Then we all wait for the attorneys to agree on language. And then the buyer will sign and make their deposit, and the seller will hopefully sign. And we just had an instance where the buyer signed with our friend Jen Ross, and the seller didn't sign. They went with another offer because anything can happen until the contracts are signed. So that's the climate. That is why it's possible for a buyer to make more than one offer and not be in bad faith, because nothing's signed. Nothing happens until you sign a binding document, right? So if you are a buyer and you're going piecemeal, one deal at a time, and you're competing with 6 other people on every deal, and you keep coming in second, third, fifth, whatever, you start to figure out, I'm going to be living in my parents' basement for another year, or I'm going to still be living in this apartment for another year. What can we do to get the show on the road here? So the idea of, let's make an offer on every property we like, cast a wider net. And this is why some sellers in multiple bid situations are not having the first deal that they take perform, and they have to go to a backup deal. So it's not like they're screwing over the seller because the seller has no other options. The seller has 5 other people waiting behind them in this market.
But, okay, it is now become the job. This is the new, do you have another house? Do you have a house? Do you have something to sell? Right? Or can you close?
Right.
This is now the new question that listing agents, you need to know to ask, and sellers, you need to know to make sure that your listing agent is asking. Do you have offers on multiple properties? It's an important thing for a seller to know, because what's happening, and nope, I'm not going to agree that it's unethical. It's a strategy. What's happening is they're putting bids on multiple properties, and they will milk the accepted offer on any given property until they are done negotiating or get an accepted offer on the property they really want. And then that leaves a seller who's acting in good faith, based on tradition, on how things have been done in the markets years prior. And our MLS rules really are geared towards more of a normal market, where they're very rigid with, you got to reporting an accepted offer. How is that an accepted offer if the buyer still has their feet in other pools? Right. So I have been in the last couple of years, now I don't list and sell like I used to, but when I am working with the seller, a couple of things. With buyers, I don't necessarily ask, I just assume that they have offers on other properties. And I just let them know it's an accepted offer contingent upon your inspections being done and you coming back and telling me you are ready to move forward. That is when you will have an actual accepted offer.
Right.
And then you can sort of tell right there and then, because if they're going to obviously order their inspections immediately, if they're serious. I also make sure they understand I'm not looking to create a bidding war or, do all that chaos, because I oftentimes think that scares away the best buyers. But no, we don't have an accepted offer. You don't get to come back with a laundry list of shit. Sorry. And still think you have an accepted offer. That's not what an accepted offer is. And the MLS, it's very black and white, and everybody just sort of then starts, you didn't report an accepted offer, blah, blah, blah. So I'm very clear with it. You do not have an accepted offer. You have an accepted offer on price, but not on terms.
Right.
Until you come back.
In most systems, it's done for you. The ethical thing that you're referring to is that we have to disclose the existence of an accepted offer, even with contingencies. And in most systems, 99.9% of the systems, it's done by changing the status in the MLS to pending, because
that's not okay. That's not okay. It's not okay.
Again,
if
it's
not truly an accepted offer.
No, listen, I'm talking about other systems. Right, I'm talking about systems outside our own.
Right.
In other systems, if both sides have signed and the Code of Ethics calls for disclosure of the accepted offer, it's already changed status. It's pending. Yeah. Subject to mortgage, subject to inspection, subject to attorney approval and everything like that. but you're supposed to change it to pending. That's the way the other systems do it. We don't have that in this MLS.
Good.
Mid
I'm in
Hudson,
the minority in thinking it's a bunch of BS. It does not work well for a seller. We should really go to the way the binding agreements where a buyer has a week to do their due diligence without the worry of being outbid. But now the buyers are, everybody's getting a little taste of how that system no longer works. Okay, because buyers are worried about spending money on inspections and then someone coming along and outbidding them.
Yep.
Sellers are worried about the buyers having multiple bids on properties and that they can just, after holding, listen, I don't care what anybody says. A lot of people are scared off and turned off when they see multiple bids on a property.
Absolutely. Many people don't want to throw their hat in the bidding war ring. I get that. What I was referring to before, where the MLS changes status, is Sacramento, Pittsburgh, Albany. I'm not talking about our area.
I don't
the
like
other systems, it works
either.
better,
I guess,
because this contract is
it
already
works
signed.
in those other areas because they have that due diligence period.
Yeah, they do. We don't.
Yeah, it doesn't work
We
in our
don't.
area.
It does not work in our area.
Broken. You hear that?
It is broken. And who do we blame for it being broken?
Key. Aren't you on the board? Fix that. Fix it. Because it's BS.
Sure. I as a board member of HGAR will just single-handedly wave my scepter and fix it. So one thing that will not get changed in this area is the attorney's power over the transaction. Years ago, the attorneys convinced the boards, I don't know how it happened, but years ago, attorneys in New York and the surrounding metropolitan area convinced the powers that be that make these contracts, whatever, that agents should not write the contracts like they do every place else. We should write the contracts, and you're all going to wait until we do it. Do your inspections, do your stuff, and then when all of that is done, we'll write up the contract. Not understanding that the dynamics of many markets means that in many cases, sellers can kick the buyers to the curb, or buyers can kick the sellers to the curb. No one's protected. Until both sides sign.
Yeah. It's crazy. And there's no recourse for money spent.
None. So think about this. This is what people don't understand. You get an accepted offer. You spend $500 on a home inspection. You spend another $100 on radon. Maybe you pay a guy $300 to come in and look at the septic. You got $1,000 into this thing. And then the seller says, well, we got an offer of, what was the one with Jen? $60,000 higher.
Yeah.
And the buyer said, okay, fair enough. Can you at least give us back our $1,000? And the seller goes, no.
And I can't blame the seller. Because it falls under not my problem. And not everybody has, just like the buyer doesn't have the $1,000, the seller doesn't necessarily have the $1,000. It's just a really crappy system.
The seller's going to have $1,000 when it closes.
Assuming that's a big assumption. You have no idea.
Of course, if it doesn't close, the seller's just gone from 2 offers to 0.
Right.
So that's not so good. So if it were, here's where I'm going to disagree with you. I think if the buyer has signed and sent the contract back, the seller should reimburse them for their expenses. And if the seller's cash poor right now, at the closing, later on, get them the money back.
The problem is that the seller's not obligated because the seller didn't sign. This is where it goes back. And actually, Mark Seiden talks about this a lot, about getting offers signed, because that's where there is some liability when there is signatures involved, which is those binding agreements they do upstate, right?
Yeah, but the attorneys around here will never go for that.
Yeah, I don't.
They will not go for an attorney. What you're referring to?
Yeah, I don't agree. We have a whole bunch of new, young. Oh, we've got some strange comments.
Really? What are they saying?
It's Russian, I think, or something. So, No, see, saying people will never go for things, that's not how change happens. You've got new young attorneys getting into the business. I think the board should make a push for getting it done correctly, making the process smoother, making it fair for all involved.
Look, and if I could reinvent how it's done around here, I would do it the way I was trained in Rochester, New York. You have your bar association approved contract. It is subject to attorney review.
Review. Yeah.
All right. The agents fill in the price, fill in the dates. We're not practicing law without a license. We're filling in things the way somebody would at Home Depot buying a lawnmower. Okay. And nothing is binding until the attorneys review everything and send their ratification of approval. That's the way they do it in Bergen County. That's the way they do it in North Jersey. That's the way they do it the rest of New York State. The seller's protected, the buyer is protected, the contingencies can still get played out, and we should do it here this way so we can avoid people making multiple offers just to protect their own interests and misleading sellers into thinking that there's more interest than there really is, perhaps, or people making plans. And, you got to understand the cascade domino effect of getting an accepted offer around here is that people start to call movers. They start to lock rates. They start to make commitments based on what their agent tells them, based on oftentimes what their attorney tells them. But until it is signed by all parties, which takes forever around here, there is no protection. Nothing is binding. Right. And I will tell you firsthand, I did this for 5 years upstate. Billions and billions of dollars of real estate gets sold in New York every year this way. There is no downside to broker prepared contracts, none whatsoever. And there is no loss of attorney value in that setting either. The attorneys are just as important. They still play a role. And we actually take out the negative components of attorney involvement, the red tape, the over almost litigating something where everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants, you want to buy, we want to sell. We've agreed on big picture things like prices and everything like that. Let's let the attorneys hash out through attorney review the threshold for bringing the place into compliance if that comes up, or the mortgage contingency date or something like that, if that's still not, if that needs to be renegotiated. But if that can be done, then there's no downside. There is absolutely no downside. The attorneys still get to advocate. It's a bar association created contract. It's not like we wrote it. We didn't write it. We just filled in the date.
Yep.
It is the best system, and it keeps attorneys in their role. And okay, yeah. Well, I need to make that go away. All right, so that is my rant about this. I think it would be great if we had broker prepared contracts with attorney approval, because right now attorney prepared and executed contracts take forever. And when you take time, the window of risk that is open is not in any client's best interests.
No. And everybody always assumed it was always in the seller's best interest. And now we are seeing that that's not the case.
It's not in the seller's best interest. The buyer can walk. Go back 10 years ago, 12 years ago. The seller, it was a severe buyer's market. We finally got a buyer. Hallelujah. There's nothing you can do to hold that buyer to the contract.
No. And then we're
after weeks,
and the house will just go market, basically.
Find something else.
Because especially in a buyer's market, when something says accepted offer, no, it's like it has leprosy. No one's going near it.
Yeah.
So, now the seller has to take that risk and report it, which is BS, because that, to me, it's not an accepted offer until a contract is signed. Sorry, the way things are, because there's nothing binding anybody. So I don't see how that's really.
Yeah, it's a very imperfect system, and it is broken.
All right. We'll see
We're
you
done?
all. Yes, we will see you all next week. Hold on.